Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Quran Weekly. This is Qutayba Abbasi from Dallas, Texas, and I'm really psyched to be speaking to you today. Inshallah, we're going to talk about a topic around trials and tribulations and how we can really benefit from our situations that we go through in our daily lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He poses a question to every human being who claims belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His deen. He asks all of us, do we think that we will be left alone upon claiming belief and we won't be tested? And He subhanahu wa ta'ala, He answers that question. He answers that question telling us that this was the case since the beginning of time for every human being. That all of us, we were tested. We were tested in order for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to know who amongst us were truthful in our claims and who amongst us were liars. So we can see in this ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He ties al-iman with ibtila, with the test. Yani, if you claim iman, you will be tested. If you claim belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you claim you are a Muslim, if you claim you are a mu'min, you will be asked to put your money where your mouth is. You will be put in situations where you will have to define yourself. Are you a Muslim or not? We understand that this was the case since the beginning of time. And I'm going to go quickly through the beginning of time till the end. We know that all the anbiya, every nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was tested. Starting from Adam alayhi salam all the way down to Muhammad alayhi salatu salam. Adam alayhi salam, we know he was tested initially from the test with shaitan. Shaitan made the whispering in his ear and told him to take the apple from the tree, and that test was put onto Adam alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam also was put through tests, through the people's mockery, ridicule, as he was building a ship, a huge ship. So he was tested. Imagine what he was going through. That was a test and trial for him. Explaining to his family, explaining to his son, explaining to his community what he was doing, and his community just looking at him building, a huge ship, the test that he was put through. And then ultimately, when the order of Allah Azza wa Jal came for the destruction, the ultimate test of having to forego his own flesh and blood. His own flesh and blood. So yes, Adam and Nuh alayhim salam, they were tested. Ibrahim alayhi salam, one of the great anbiya who was really tested. I mean, he was tested from a very young age. From a very young age. The people rejected him, his own family rejected him. He was asked to migrate from one land to another. He was asked to slaughter his son. He was asked to leave his family in the middle of nowhere. Imagine what he was going through. Tests, my dear brothers and sisters, trials and tribulations. Yaqub alayhi salam, the loss of his son at a very young age, his most beloved son. Also the blindness. I mean, imagine what he's going through. Tests, my dear brothers and sisters. Yusuf alayhi salam, the plotting and the planning of his brothers, the being thrown into the well, slanderous accusations, being imprisoned. I mean, all these tests that we can all relate to, my dear brothers and sisters. Ayub alayhi salam, the prolonged illness that he went through. Musa alayhi salam, what he had to deal with Firaun and his people. Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam, the power and the wealth that Allah Azza wa Jal bestowed upon them both. And Dawood, being tested with having to judge between two parties. And he didn't make the right judgment. And Sulaiman alayhi salam, being tested with the lifeless body on the throne. Yunus alayhi salam, after giving up his job in making da'wah. Yunus alayhi salam, after giving up on his job in making da'wah, Allah Azza wa Jal put him into the belly of a whale. The test, my dear brothers and sisters, the trial, the tribulation. Isa alayhi salam, the people rejected him. They plotted to kill him, my dear brothers and sisters. Muhammad alayhi salam, being orphaned at a young age, the persecution, the torment, the ridicule, and the attacks that he went through throughout his entire prophethood. From the moment he was a Muslim and a Nabi, he was tested, my dear brothers and sisters. So we understand that all these Anbiya, all these great men, the ones whom you think would have perfection and no tests because they are so pious and religious, they were tested. And they were tested perhaps the most hardest tests, the most difficult tests, the most stressful tests, the ones that really test their iman and their trust and reliance and everything, my dear brothers and sisters. But there are some of us who say that those were Anbiya. They were great men. They will be tested. We're not Anbiya. We're not like them. Well, for those, I tell you, even the Sahaba, they were tested. They were tested greatly. When you think about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ardah, in the moment that he was in the cave, in the moment that he was in the cave with the Prophet alayhi salam, and the Prophet's head was in his lap, and as the Prophet alayhi salam was sleeping, Abu Bakr noticed that there were snakes coming out of the cave in the holes and crevices of the cave. The test he went through. He could have shaken the Prophet and told him, we have snakes in the cave, let's find another cave. Let's go this way, let's go that way. But the test he went through was to not wake the Prophet, was to not disturb him from his sleep. And he went through that, my dear brothers and sisters. The snakes bit him, and yet he still covered every hole with a part of his body, with the limb of his body, the feet, the hands, to the extent that the snake was biting so much, and the Prophet ﷺ woke up with the tears of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ardah. Yes, he was tested. He was tested with that, with his health. He was tested with his wealth. Many times the Prophet ﷺ asked, and he gave whatever he had. He gave whatever he had. He had nothing. Is that not a test? If you gave everything you had today, how would you make ends meet? How would you get along with your life? So yes, my dear brothers and sisters, he was tested. Umar Khattab also was tested. Uthman ibn Affan also was tested. Ali ibn Abi Talib, they were all tested in their own respective ways. But again, we can say that they were Sahaba, they were great men. They were great men and they were tested. They had the Iman, they had this, they had that. They could do what they wanted. They saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So then I tell you that the great ulama, the great scholars of old, they were also tested. When we look at the life of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, just the life of this one man who out of all the ulama has the most works published. And believe it or not, all those works, they were written, or majority of them, they were written while he was in jail, while he was imprisoned. While he was in prison, my dear brothers and sisters. He was imprisoned for the majority of his life. He was in jail for the majority of his life. And look how he reacted to that test. He saw jail or imprisonment or prison or dungeons as an opportunity to get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, as an opportunity to have a stronger relationship, if you may, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many of us go through that kind of reaction in our tests? How many of us accept our tests as an opportunity to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So I'm sharing all this with you to kind of give us a better understanding of trials and tribulations. That the iman, when you claim you're a Muslim, when you claim you're a believer, when you claim you're a mu'min, you will be tested. It's guaranteed. And that brings me to my final and most important story. This story, I think, signifies how even individuals like you and me will be tested. We may not be anbiya, we may not be sahaba, we may not be even scholars, we may not be students of knowledge. We are just Qutayba and you, average individuals. I want to share a story with you of someone who was tested, an average individual, perhaps even less than average, who, because of the way she responded to her test, the way she reacted to her test, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dignified her. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exalted her ranks to the extent that she was worthy enough to be mentioned to our beloved Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the story of the hairstylist or the salon stylist of Firaun. This story was narrated to our beloved Prophet ﷺ from the angel Jibreel on the night of Isra wal Mi'raj. As the Prophet ﷺ was ascending to the heaven, he came upon a rih, a smell, a fragrance, if you may, a beautiful smell. And he inquired to Jibreel ﷺ what this smell was. So Jibreel ﷺ, he replied to Muhammad and he said, this is the smell of the hairstylist of Firaun and her children. So Muhammad ﷺ, he didn't know this story. Imagine, he didn't know the story of this lady and her children. So he asked Jibreel ﷺ, tell me, Ya Jibreel, tell me, O Jibreel, the story of the hairstylist of Firaun and her children. So Jibreel ﷺ, he began the story. He said one day, the hairstylist of Firaun was combing the hair of the daughter of Firaun. And as she was combing the hair, the comb fell to the ground. The comb fell to the ground. So she reached over to pick up the comb. And as she reached to pick it up, she muttered, Bismillah. And the daughter of Firaun heard her. So the daughter of Firaun asked her, Bismillah, yani Abi, in the name of God, you mean my father? She said, Rabbi wa Rabbi Abuki wa Rabbi samawati wal ard. My Lord, the Lord of your father, the Lord of the skies and the earth. The daughter of Firaun asked her, can I tell my father what you have said? Just imagine, this was in a tyrannical society, an oppressive society. There was no freedom of speech. There was no due rights. There was no trial or lawyers and speedy trial. So the hairstylist told the daughter, "Go ahead, tell your father whatever you wish, whatever you please, tell your father." So the news went to Firaun that a certain someone, an insignificant slave, was challenging his claim to being God, and that there was an ilah, another God on top of him. So he summoned this hairstylist in front of him and his advisors, and he held this trial. And he asked her one simple question. One simple question. Man rabbuki ya mashta? Who is your Lord, O hairstylist? Look how he addressed the hairstylist. He didn't even call her by her name. He addressed her by the status that she held in that society. Basically, he was saying, who is your Lord? Who is your Lord, O hairstylist? She looked at Firaun and she replied, Rabbi wa Rabbuka Allah. My Lord and your Lord is Allah. Ya Allah. Imagine, my dear brothers and sisters, you are in front of a dictator, a king. Yani as the Prophet ﷺ said, the most oppressive tyrant that will ever walk the face of this earth. You're in front of him and his advisors. And he asks you, who is your Lord? Look at this test that she was put into. And she replied with no hesitancy, my Lord and your Lord is Allah. So Firaun, he smiled and he realized what he's dealing with. So he sent her home. He sent her home and he told her, you will be summoned tomorrow, you and your family. So she went home that day, and Firaun had prepared a big cauldron, a big cauldron. Yani Ibn Kathir said that in that cauldron, an entire cow, live, can fit into it. And in this cauldron was put water, and that water was boiled to the point that Ibn Kathir, again, he explained that the water was shooting out and touching the ground beside the cauldron or the pot. And then he summoned the hairstylist and her family. And he asked her, Man rabbuki ya mashta? And she replied immediately, Rabbi wa rabbuka Allah. So he took her oldest child. He took her oldest child and threw him in the pot. And his body melted in that boiling hot water. And then he turned to the mashita. He turned to the hairstylist and he asked her again, Man rabbuki ya mashita? Who is your Lord, O hairstylist? And after seeing her first child being melted, she felt the pain. Just imagine, your child. She felt the pain. But she desired Allah. So she replied, Rabbi wa rabbuka Allah. And Firaun, he took her second child and he threw him in the cauldron, in the pot. Then he asked one more time, Man rabbuki ya mashta? And this time she was hesitating. She had one last child, a baby infant. But even as she hesitated, she realized the gravity of her test. It was much harder than just statement, just saying something. It was affecting her life, her family, her livelihood, everything. But she still replied. She still replied what she desired more, what she wanted more, what she felt was more important than herself, what she felt was more important than her life, than the lives of her children. She said, Rabbi wa rabbuka Allah. So Firaun, he took her last baby infant, her last child, and put him at the rim of that pot. Put him at the rim of that pot. And he said, Man rabbuki ya mashita? Who is your Lord, O hairstylist? And she was hesitating. She was hesitating until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed a miracle. In all of this test, He made the baby speak. And the baby spoke to his mother and told her, تقدمي يا إمي ولا تحزني فإننا في الجنة. Come forth, my mother, and do not worry, do not despair, don't lose hope, because we are in Jannah. So she replied, Rabbi wa rabbuka Allah. And Firaun took the child and her mother and threw them in the pot, and they melted away. So when we look at this story, my dear brothers and sisters, this test that she went through, we understand that, yes, on this earth, it was insignificant. She died and thousands of years passed. No one heard about her. But one man did. And that man is one that we claim to love, one that we adore, one that we emulate our entire lives after. She was dignified in front of the one that is most beloved to each and every one of us. So if she was dignified to him, she must be dignified to us. She was mentioned to our beloved Prophet ﷺ, so she is an example for us, for our trials, our tribulations, our tests. When it comes to Iman, we will be tested. But how will we respond? Will we respond like the mashita, like the hairstylist? Will we respond like the ulama? Will we respond like the sahaba? Will we respond like the anbiya? One thing we see as a commonality between all of them is that their response was their trust and love and reliance and dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every aspect, starting from Adam alayhi salam through all the anbiya, the sahaba and all the sahaba's trials and tribulations, the ulama, all the tribulations that they went through, and even this insignificant lady. They returned to Allah in the time of their test. They asked for Allah's help. They hoped in Allah's mercy. They relied only upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of that complete reliance in regards to this test and tribulation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them, my dear brothers and sisters. And that is what we must work on. That is what we must understand when we face our trials and tribulation, when we face the tests in our lives. A lot of us think whenever we face an issue that we can't handle it, that it's too much. Just remember, every issue that you've been through, someone else has been through it, and worse. Our tests, realistically speaking, in these days, is nothing compared to the people before us. Can you imagine living in a society where your children are used as almost blackmail for you to change in what you believe? In what you believe? In your beliefs? That's mental torture. So what we go through in these days, our trials and tribulations of having not enough money to buy the extra car or to buy the bigger house or to spend the night in a nicer hotel, a 5-star as opposed to 3-star. These trials are nothing. These trials are nothing compared to what they went through before, where there's no food to eat, where there's no hospitals to go to in times of sickness, where there's no AAA to come help you when your tire pops on the side of the road. Our trials and tribulations are minuscule compared to the ones before us. Yet, we don't find ourselves asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't find ourselves asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. Them who had nothing but Allah, they relied upon Allah completely on issues that were miracles. Guys. Think about it, issues that were miracles. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, outside of His sunnah, He came through. In our issues, which don't require miracles, they just require a little bit of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't even ask Him for that. We need to really take a step back and analyze, how is it that we react to our situations in our lives? Do we even take the opportunity to learn from these situations, to benefit ourselves, to benefit our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if not, we need to start doing that now. We need to start getting acquainted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having a relationship with Him. Because when these tests come, when these tribulations come, and they will come, and as the Prophet ﷺ told us, they will get greater, they will become harder, we will need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to do such. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to establish a stronger relationship with Him. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Quran Weekly. So do yourself a favor. If you benefited from this video, go ahead and like it and share it on your Facebook and Twitter. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, as is narrated in Sahih Muslim, "Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasana, falahu ajru wa ajru man amala biha," that whoever does something good, inshallah ta'ala, and starts it or shares it and other people follow, then he will get the reward that he has, and of course the reward of anyone who followed him in that, inshallah. So if someone else benefits from this, you get the same reward as the presenter, inshallah, and the same reward as the producer. So go ahead and like it, love it, share it. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.